Singapore Testing Forum. So I'm amazed you all turned up, amazed, playing havoc. In fact, we've had a late change this evening. And we've had a long day of stress and emotion. The second speaker, Rajesh, Cathay Pacific, wasn't allowed on the plane this morning, ironically, so he might get a train next time. But he's sworn that he will be here for the next event. We're delighted to announce that Nicky, who heads up a very senior test effort at Credit Suisse, has kindly stepped in his absence. So we're delighted. So thank you for that. Thank you very much. Okay. Look, to give you an idea of the playbook, I think you've all seen the agenda. So really the thought behind it was that we want to start to establish a knowledge sharing networking association really around the testing function in Singapore. We run a testing consulting firm. This is not a platform for me to advertise, by the way. And what we see is there's a lot of talent and a lot of good minds in Singapore, and in conjunction with Leah Stockley, who is a highly experienced senior test practitioner and passionate about the education and knowledge sharing in the region. And so we've collaborated to bring this to pass. So we're delighted to support it, and it is an independent forum, and that's the aim. Clearly these things need funding and sponsoring, so we're delighted to be part of that. Okay. So what I will do, you've seen, as I said, you've seen the agenda. So Leah will open shortly. I will ask one of the sponsors to do a quick overview and introduction, and it is very quick, 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'll invite Leah to the podium to start. So Dominic, please.
I have the honor to say a few words about the sponsors, the 2 sponsors. How to click out this? Not loud enough. Okay. I have the honor to say a few words about the sponsors, the testing consultancy in Tricentis. But before I tell you what they do, what we do, what we stand for, I wanted to start with a very short video.
All right, girls, listen carefully. This is the wrapping department. Now, the candy will pass by on this conveyor belt and continue into the next room where the girls will pack it. Now, your job is to take each piece of candy and wrap it in one of these papers and then put it back on the belt. You understand? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Let her roll! Let her roll! Wait here. Somebody's asleep at the switch.
What are you doing up here? I thought you were downstairs boxing chocolates. Oh, they kicked me out of there fast. Why? I kept pinching them to see what kind they were. The 4th department I've been in. Oh, I didn't do so well either.
All right, girls. Now, this is your last chance. If one piece of candy gets past you and into the packing room unwrapped, you're fired.
Miss Van.
Let her roll!
Well, this is easier. Yeah, we can handle it, okay?
pressure in your companies that you have ever increasing expectations that you need to do more with less at higher speed and lower cost, but at a better quality, then we would like to talk to you. Whilst the testing consultancy and Tricentis combined offer services and technology for the entire life cycle of the testing, there's two key differentiators that we are well known for in the market. One is we offer computer-aided test design. And computer-aided test design is a systematic approach to define test portfolios supported by methodology and technology, where you will get much superior test portfolios with fewer tests but higher test coverage. And the second key main differentiator that we have is model-based test automation. Because the majority of the world is still on a traditional script-based test automation, we moved on into the next generation of test automation, which is model-based. And model-based test automation eliminates a whole range of maintenance issues that are inherent in script-based testing. And that's the main promise of it. You can achieve much higher test coverage with model-based test automation. You can reach out to non-technical stuff much more easily, and it will free you up from tedious, repetitive, boring tasks so that you can do something much more interesting, such as context-driven testing. Now, this is not just a claim. We have numerous case studies across the globe, from large-scale banks to smaller organizations and workshops. Here's a case study from a large Swiss bank, a leading wealth management bank, one of the top 10 in the world. And you see here the implementation. This was an effort of 85 days implementation, where we went in and we redesigned the entire test suite of 2,200 test cases to less than half, or almost half test cases that we have in place, whilst we have, according to their own statistics, increased the test coverage from 33% to 95%. The number of test cases is down by 77%. There's test cases in there which were not covered for that test suite. The test execution is down by 87%. The test coverage is down up from 33 to 95%. That was an exercise in only 90 days on a security training system. Is that a unique case? No, it's not. Here's another local case that you might be interested. This is a large-scale broker system which is used in Australia. More than half of all brokers. That system settles $2.5 billion every single day at the Australian Stock Exchange. We've achieved similar results in only 4 months. Two consultants, one test analyst, one business analyst. We've automated 1,000 test cases, and you see all these test actions. But the bottom line is we have increased the speed. The effort of execution is down by 80%, and their total cost, annual cost, has been reduced by 50%, break even in 1.1 years. And here's another case study. This is the ASB Group. This is a Commonwealth Bank, owned bank in New Zealand and Australia. Similar story. 5 months, 2 consultants, 1 test analyst, 1 business analyst have automated their consumer banking system and have, in this case, dramatically reduced their effort of test execution as well as their costs. Now, if you are interested, there's some collateral back there. There's also a Gartner study. There's reports from Gartner as an impartial view on model-based testing. This is going to be the future of test automation. Thank you very much.
Right. Without further ado, Leah Stockley.
So thanks everyone for coming. Can you hear me okay? Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, thank you everyone for coming along to what we hope is the first of many regular test forums in Singapore, where you can come and learn. If people want to come and share their own experience, please get in touch with us. We're happy to have presenters coming up here. As you know, we can't have Rajesh, but I know he's keen to come back, so the next event, hopefully, he'll get on the plane and join us for the next event as well. So, basically, I want to talk to you today about what I see as a revolution in testing. I've been in testing about 15 years now, and I haven't seen a lot of change in that time, to be honest. The main change I have seen, I don't think is a very positive one. It seems that the focus has become more and more on process and the quality of the process, and we've forgotten that what is actually important is the quality of the testing that we do. And stakeholders are lulled into this sense that if we concentrate on the process and get that right, that's going to do the testing for us. And then they start to believe that, well, if the process is doing the testing, anyone can do testing. We don't need skills. We can just find people who can follow instructions and do the testing will be cheap and done that way. But the revolution I'm talking about is people are waking up and realizing that doesn't deliver the quality that we need of our testing. Actually, what we need is skilled, intelligent testers. That's going to give us the results in the time that we need those results. So, if you look at the industry, people that are really pushing that message are the context-driven testing community. They're really fighting for thinking testers. So that's what I'm talking to you about today, is what I see as the rise of the thinking tester, that we can challenge those common misconceptions and show projects how we really can add much more value than they give us credit for. So when I was doing some research to put this talk together, I was amazed to find this out on the internet. So apparently a Forbes study that was conducted a year ago in America found that the happiest job is a software QA engineer. Anyone here agree with that? I guess there's many questions here. One is, do we do QA? Do we do testing? Could we explain the difference? Maybe that's a topic for an online debate or something else. I won't really focus on that today, but the question I want to ask you is, are you happy in your job? How many people here feel motivated? Yes, I'm a tester. No? Yay! Fantastic, a few. Good. So, the fact that you're all here shows me that you have some motivation. You do want to improve, you do want to get better at testing, and be proud of that. So, congratulations for being here and doing that. What amazed me actually about this article is it kicked off a huge storm in the community of people who are almost famous testers saying this is rubbish, there's no way this can be factual. Testers are miserable, we have a tough time, we're always getting beaten up by the project, we have to fight to do our job well. And they're very, very negative about testing, even though they've made a very lucrative career out of it. So I was quite surprised by that. So what I wanted to share with you is why I'm motivated about being a tester, what's made a difference for me in the last couple of years. Really improved my morale, and hopefully the morale, I'm trying to inspire testers, hopefully to improve the morale of many more testers. And for me, one of the critical aspects to that is mindset. So, if you believe that you can't change how stakeholders do testing, if you believe that you can't influence change or make improvements, if you believe you're just a tester, then you're right. That's the way it is. But if you believe that you can make a difference, then you can. If you believe you have the authority or the ability to make those improvements, suggest them, then you'll succeed in that. So about 3 years ago, I knew that I needed to improve the way testing was being done on my project, and I wanted to get out I went out into the industry and found out what's happening in testing, what's changing, how can I bring that back to my project and help others around me. And that's where I found context-driven testing and the changes that people are doing with that. So I spoke with my boss, and we decided we were going to do a rollout and try to influence people to learn these techniques and understand what this means. And about 2 years ago, most of my colleagues, some of whom are in this room, thought I was just crazy. This was a fad, it was going to go away, just ignore me, it's not going to make a difference. But since then, I've trained over 300 testers globally in these techniques. In the last 6 months, I've worked with over 20 projects to help build their strategy, work out a roadmap of how they can implement these techniques. And again, there's many people in the room that did get inspired and have made changes by themselves as well. I guess the icing on the cake for me, in the last 2 weeks, I've presented to 10 different directors in the large bank that I work in, and 2 managing directors about context-driven testing and the benefits it can bring to their project and why they should sit up and take notice and encourage this with their teams. So really, context-driven testing shifted my mindset, and that's what allowed me to make a lot of other changes and improvements. I won't go into huge amounts of detail about context-driven testing right now, but I guess I will say in a nutshell, it's about switching your brain on. It's about realising there is no one best practice that is going to solve every problem for every project. So what we need to do as testers, as context-driven testers, is build our testing skills and have the ability to overproduce testing ideas and then be able to select what the best one is for that context, for that project. So that's where I'm trying to focus and trying to help share experience, share techniques, share skills that people can learn from and then improve their testing. So what kind of skills do we need to build as testers? Obviously there are many. We already have many of those skills. For me then, it's not about writing test cases. That's not where testers add value. We add value, and we can add more value by developing some of these other skills. So do you seek information as a tester? Do you wait for your teams to give you the specs and the documents? Or do you get out there and look for other sources of information? That could be internally, that could be people, it could be Google, it could be a competitor's product. Do you seek ways to improve your testing and your knowledge of the system? What about questioning? Do you practice your questioning skills? Are you actively trying to improve how you question? So I think the 5 whys is quite common. Keep asking why till you get more understanding. But what about how, when, and who? What specifically? Using these questions can really help us drill down and get the information we need to be able to conduct much better testing, design much better tasks. Communication is another one. Hopefully that's not a surprise. The better we communicate, the better rapport we can build with our teams. And an important part of communication is the ability to listen as well. So we can ask questions, but if we're not listening to the response, we're not going to be able to take action and do good testing from that. What about improvements? So can you personally think of an improvement you've made on your project that you can take credit for, that you're proud of? Is there something you think needs improving? Perhaps you feel that's not your job. Someone else should improve it for you. Well, that's your mindset at work. So if you believe it's not your responsibility to improve it, you probably will never have a job where it would be your responsibility to improve it. But you take action now that's going to help you achieve that growth that you may want in your career in the long term. And ultimately, a huge one for me is continuous learning. So, as I said, 15 years in testing, I probably didn't even try and learn for a few years of that. And in the last 2 years, every day I'm trying to learn something new. And it may not be specifically about testing, but it could be about one of these skills. Every day I want to learn something and try something new, learn something from someone else. These things are all helping me to be a better tester. And what about challenging? Do you feel you're able to challenge? Obviously do that respectfully, but whenever we do that, we help people improve. So the context-driven school of testing, if you look into those people and the way they work, is by constantly challenging each other to improve. Why did you do that? What made you perform that test in that way? Have you considered something else? So the ability to challenge ourselves, to challenge assumptions we make. When you decide something is that way, are you assuming that, or do you know it's a fact? Are you questioning yourself? And what about traditions? So testing is now full of traditions thanks to this very heavy process. So every time you follow a part of that process, do you know why you're doing it? If somebody asked you to justify why you conducted that activity in that way, can you give a better answer than that's just the way we do it, or I was told to? If that's your answer, then there's probably a better way of getting the job done. It's probably a way to be more efficient at testing. And then what about more maybe obvious testing skills? So, analysis and test modelling. Do you spend time doing that before you design your tests? Do you know what I mean by these terms? I'm not going to go into them today. I think they're great topics for future forums that maybe we can do some sort of dedicated sessions on these kind of skills. If you can't wait till then, do it. What about test framing? Do you know every time you perform a test exactly why you're performing that? Do you know what information that's giving your stakeholders? Do you do static testing? Early testing, test the documents, that age-old graph we all know and love about the cost of fixing a defect increasing the later we find it. So early static testing is essential to deliver value to our project. And then who here uses exploratory testing? Anyone? A couple of people? Yes? Mostly both hands lifting up there. So, this is something that I think when we introduced it, everyone thought we couldn't do. You cannot do this in a large regulated company. Yes, we can. We've proved it. If you learn about it, if you learn how you can do it in a structured way, it's at the heart of excellent testing. It really allows you to add value to your project as long as you understand it and do it well. Amazingly, a very conventional test manager who I used to work for about 10 years ago recently put a status on LinkedIn saying, "I'm amazed at the value exploratory testing has just delivered to my project." So I was really surprised by this, but I couldn't resist just going, "Why are you surprised? We're using it every day to rate value. What's the surprise?" And to his credit said, "Well, I'm a stickler for process, you know me, but I never thought this would work, but the results are unambiguous. It's been a huge success." So results really are speaking for themselves if you learn these techniques and use them well. So the last thing I want to talk about in terms of mindset for testers is risk. How do you consider yourself when you think about risk? One thing to realise is as testers, we only have jobs because somebody with money and a reputation at stake cares about the risk when the software goes live. Without that, we wouldn't be in this room. We wouldn't be testing. But traditionally, I think testers are, and I used to be, very risk averse. We felt we couldn't predict where the system may get impacted because of the change. Therefore, we must test everything. We can't predict it, let's test as much as possible. And it kind of leads to, 6 weeks before you start testing, you plan out everything you should test, and then during the project, you probably find yourself running scripts and tests that you realise aren't adding any value at all, but you said 6 weeks ago that you had to run them, therefore you have to waste time doing that. That's not a thing that motivates you. You don't go home feeling good after a day of running those kind of tests. So, one thing we need to learn as testers is risk is our friend. Embrace it. It's why we get paid. So we should understand more about it, be more proactive with risk. One of the ways we're doing that is visual test models. Again, I don't have time to kind of show you one of those today, but maybe a future session, or Google it. But visual test models, we're using mind maps to map out a system and be able to explain to our stakeholders, here's where we think the risks are, here's where this change is, we believe we should test these, we won't test this because of time. Do you agree? Allow your stakeholders to make informed decisions about the risk they're prepared to take and the testing they're prepared not to happen. And if they're not prepared to take that risk, they'll give you more time to test. So by being proactive, by clearly communicating those risks to the project team, everyone's more informed with those decisions. Do you hold an active session early in your project to think about risk? So some of our projects now, they spend an hour brainstorming with their team. What could go wrong here? And that's purely the focus of that session. What could go wrong in the product, or what could go wrong that could stop us being able to test? And we're finding the earlier that's done, we can improve our test strategy. We can automate the production of test data, or get in early with automation and help improve coverage that way. These kind of results are coming out of the simple fact of spending an hour thinking about risk with your team. So, embrace risk. Talk to your stakeholders about risk. If you can tell them, I ran these tests because it mitigates this risk in the product, they're going to start to see the value that you're adding. So that's really it. As I said, I've seen incredible change in myself and in the testers around me in the last 2 years, even more so in the last 6 months. There's really a big snowball now rolling in and a lot of change happening. And it's fantastic to see that. Testers are waking up. We realise we can add value. We realise we can challenge our teams, actually. That we can communicate more clearly with them because we understand our testing better. And that allows us to go home each day just feeling a little bit better about our job as testers. A little bit prouder. We're not just testers, we're testers. Be proud of that. So ask yourself, is that you? Are you a thinking tester? I hope so. Thank you.
Okay, now we've got a quick Q&A if you'd like to direct some questions to Leah. I'll try and turn this thing on and who's going to be first?
It was one day.
Could be, yeah.
So, exploratory testing, right? And I'm one of those probably, and I was saying to Raj earlier, a little bit old-fashioned with the whole exploratory testing thing. I remember several years ago when you and I were talking about it, etc., right?
Yeah.
So, and my nervousness comes around the risk of exploratory testing being used as an excuse just to have no formality around testing at all. Right, so completely ad hoc. So how do you address that in terms of your exploratory testing? Because I think you're right with everything you're saying, but how do you minimise that risk?
So we do a lot of what we're now calling it structured exploratory testing, because I think it's a common fear when you hear the term, you think ad hoc, unplanned. That's certainly not what we're advocating. So the key to it is excellent analysis and building a map and showing here's what the system looks like, here's the elements we're going to test. What we're finding is these testers go through that process and produce those kind of artifacts and review it with their project team. The knowledge the tester has by that point means they're absolutely able to execute the right test because they've really got a good understanding of what's important to test. To also put some management around it, we use charters. So we set out in advance what's going to be tested. So we write some scenarios, maybe some user stories or some high-level scenarios that need to be tested. Some people time box that as well. So for 2 hours, this is what my focus will be, and I'll do testing for this. So we can plan it in advance. We know when we expect to achieve coverage, who's testing it, etc. And the other element we put is test evidence. So we've been out there and looked at tools to help support the capture of test evidence. Ashish has done some great work helping us find really good tools. So there's a few on the market now designed purely to gather test evidence. Some manual, some automated. And they're fantastic. I mean, it's a way better audit trail than any test case would ever give us. And when we're showing the stakeholders those results, they can't argue, they can see exactly what we tested and how. I had a really interesting meeting with some people today as well who, another common fear with exploratory testing, if you don't have test scripts, how do you train new joiners? How do you get them up to speed? Because traditionally they give them scripts. And I had a great meeting today where they told me we had a new joiner just come in, they asked for scripts, we couldn't give it to them. But we showed them scenarios and we gave them some KT and then we got them testing. And actually they asked so much better questions, much more intelligent questions because they had to, because it was the only way they could find out information. And within 2 months that tester was running projects standalone because they just got up to speed way quicker than they would have done if they were just given a lot of scripts to follow by someone else. So yeah, there are many aspects to it, and it's important to understand it, but it's so effective and it is manageable and traceable.
Anyone else? Brave enough.
So we were talking about the exploratory testing and risk awareness. So in your approach, were you mixing risk-based testing and session-based testing?
Yeah, risk-based testing is an interesting one with the context-driven testing approach. Again, we try to be proactive in our risk assessment. So I think in more traditional testing, we may write a load of test cases and then do a risk assessment to decide which ones we're going to run, which can often cause a lot of work for a load of test cases that may never ever get used. So we try to do that risk analysis early, so we only ever invest in creating tests that will add value. And yes, obviously in the same way you're going to weight the scenarios among the most important things first as well. Does that answer your question?
Anybody else?
Hi. Do you involve stakeholders while you do a risk-based testing? Because probably you may be thinking these are the high risk, but maybe stakeholders may have sometimes a different view, especially if this is a new product or something like that, which you have not already tested it, and if it's a new product. So what are the strategies you identify the risks? You can identify based on your experience, but still, do you involve stakeholders, and what is how do you ensure that the risk is taken care of in your opinions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to involve your stakeholders, and collaboration is a huge part of contextual testing going well. So we use quite often visual test models, so we can really map out a system of what we're going to test, and very easily show that to our stakeholders. And on that model, we can highlight risk areas and put. And if you look at my map tool, there's priority numbers, so we can literally say what we think is the highest priority and risk, and of course get their opinion on it. So yeah, it's absolutely critical to do that.
I guess you are lucky because stakeholders normally does not come, they come only at the last point of time, and then they say, oh, this is important, this, that, like that.
I don't think we're lucky, I think we're fighting to engage them earlier. And we're changing how we engage with them. And I won't steal Nicky's thunder because I know that's something she's going to talk about, how we influence people about testing. So, but yeah, it's up to us to change that relationship, and it is possible.
Thank you.
How important the domain knowledge in context-driven testing?
Very important. I say that in two ways. So context-driven testing actually gives us tools, things such as heuristic checklists. I'm using a lot of jargon here that may not make sense, but checklists that remind us what information we need to go and find out. So we should be as close to experts as we can be on a system before we can test it well. But being a context-driven tester, you know how to get that information more quickly. You know what questions to ask. You know what resources are available to you. So it's important, but even if you don't have it initially, we have ways to help get that very quickly. So a heuristic checklist, if I can explain. We use one called SF Depot, San Francisco Depot we call it, and it reminds us when we're breaking down the system to think about the structure, the architecture, the functionality, the data, the interfaces to it, the platform it sits on, the operations, how it's used, and then any time factors. So with that checklist, that's going to remind me to ask a whole load of questions that will very quickly give me information about the system. That's pretty comprehensive. We kind of find, off the back of all that information, we can design a very good test approach.
You also mentioned about the mindset, but what I can see, like, the trend is like, it's just more of like passing the test, making sure that the system is working fine, instead of finding that how the system is breaking. Like earlier, like when I was doing CST and all, my initial days, it used to be like a tester should find how the system breaks.
Yeah.
Those points, break point he should be finding. But now it's just more of the mindset is changing. That okay, whether the system is working fine or not. If it's working fine, it's fantastic. No need to worry about because even from function side, domain side, even this is not much. They are not ready to invest much in testing and all. So it's just more of okay, the system is stable. It's working as expected.
Do you work in a bank? What industry do you work in?
No, I have seen in most of the banks in US as well as in Singapore.
Yes. And I think that's very common in a bank. Actually, time to market is important. Quality probably less important. So that's why context-driven testing helps, because we understand the context of the project we're in. If the most important thing is to just get it out and it doesn't have to be perfect, we've asked the right questions. We know that's where the quality bar is, and we only test to that and not above. That's not our choice as testers. We provide a service to the project to let them know it's good enough to go live. And it's a hard mindset shift for a tester because we want things to be perfect. but the people who pay us don't necessarily, then we have to adjust.
Even I want to add to that point. Now the scenario is very fast changing. Like we have agile project management, and we have the deliveries so in a year we have 12 deliveries, and like there are a lot of regulatory requirements that are coming up, and we have to meet those deadlines. So if you don't follow this approach, it's really hard for us to identify the approach, like what to follow. If we start creating the system, maybe we have a time constraints in that case.
I think as testers we're always trying to break the system. That's fine, but in ways that matter, but in ways that would cause a problem in production if it happened.
This
unless there are any other questions, maybe we could take a break for 10 minutes. If we could thank Leah again for a fabulous first session.